9:35. So in today's PIX Parenting Plus, advocating for your child, especially when they're dealing with developmental delays.
Yeah, Mom Jacalyn Lee is here to share her journey and her advice on how to navigate early concerns and get answers to your questions. So good morning to you, Jacalyn. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So just real quickly, in a nutshell, what does it mean to be neurodivergent?
Being neurodivergent means that all of our brains work a little bit differently, and for neurodivergent people, they process things a little bit even more differently, I would say.
And your daughter, Isla, you noticed things very early on, didn't you?
Yes, so I first noticed that something was different with my youngest daughter, Isla, when she was just about a year old. And when she was 2, she was actually diagnosed as autistic. And then about a year later, thanks to a developmental pediatrician who recommended genetic testing, we actually found out that she has this extremely rare genetic condition. This is a mouthful. It's called DEF1, Associated Neurodevelopmental Disorder. The acronym is DAND. And that DAND diagnosis explained all of the areas of support that she needed, especially when there's less than 200 people in the world with it.
Wow.
Explained autism, non-speaking, abnormal brain scans, and more.
But what was it, I'm sorry, what was it that you actually noticed that made you think?
So that's a great question. We first noticed eye contact was a little bit different.
Okay.
I felt like she was making eye contact, but not quite as long and not quite as consistent as I felt like would be typical. And she also wasn't speaking or babbling as much as typically. And I felt like her facial expressions were just not as dynamic as her older sisters.
And so when you went to the doctors, what were the doctors saying, and what kept you to keep pushing for further testing? What made you not want to go with a different doctor?
Well, it's interesting. So her first pediatrician actually really felt like she was typical, that she, that I was comparing her to her verbally advanced older sisters, and but we really, trusted our gut and pushed for an evaluation, and that's how we found out that she actually was autistic, which then led us down this pathway of then getting genetic testing. And it's actually really important to note that the American Academy of Pediatrics actually recommends genetic testing as the first test when a child is showing a global developmental delay, an intellectual disability, or an autism diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody handles it differently, but when you got her diagnosis, how did you react to hearing it?
It felt surreal, honestly. I was devastated and I was grieving. I'm probably still grieving, honestly. But I really turned that grief into action. So the first thing I did was make sure that her medical team was set up correctly. With the DAN diagnosis, we actually found out that she has an 80% risk of seizures. So closely monitoring that was critical, making sure that she was in the right school support system. And I started a Substack where I share resources for families kind of going through the same experience too, called the Atypical Advocate.
Yeah, and you also launched a nonprofit now for other families as well.
I did. I launched a nonprofit last year called the DAND Alliance with 4 other DAND moms who also have this diagnosis for their kids. And we're very focused on raising awareness, understanding, and accelerating scientific research for this rare genetic condition that's closely linked to autism, and the diagnosis rates are rising 62% year over year.
What is your advice then for other parents, and if they're in a different situation, right? But they know there's something that may be at risk for their child, and they don't feel the doctor is listening. What is your advice to them on the path of action and kind of finding a new resource?
I would say to parents out there to trust your gut. Even if you're not a doctor, I like to say that you are a PhD on your child. You are an expert on your child. And so trust your gut, be partners with your clinicians, but be proactive in asking questions. I think that's really critical in terms of making the difference between waiting for answers and finding answers.
Yeah, and the thing is, it doesn't just affect the child. It really affects the whole family, doesn't it?
It does affect the whole family, especially when there are multiple children involved. I can certainly speak to that. I have 3 little ones. And so the siblings of kids with disabilities are actually called glass children. And this term comes from this idea that parents are so focused on the kid that needs more support that they look right through the other kids, which is really sad. And they can sometimes feel invisible. But what's interesting to note is that these glass children, they tend to be more compassionate, empathetic, resilient, and adaptive. But at the same time, they can be more prone to depression and anxiety and feel resentment. There's just a lot of emotional burden that they carry.
Jacalyn, thank you for coming in to explain some of these things and to talk about your nonprofit as well.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate your time.